So, like Hannah, I'm from a business background without even a public exhibition space, so I'm even more internally focused, which has really kind of driven how far we've gone into the digital arena up until this point. So, quick background into the service, because that kind of explains our practices up until now. So, we are predominantly an internal resource. We are there to support the business, and we've taken that stance purely for survival purposes, so we can justify why they employ so many of us and care for this collection. And really, so that means that we are not out there trying to bring people into our office to look at the collection. We don't advertise anywhere, really. We don't have any catalogues online. We have very little external presence, so we use the company sites that are available to us to get some material out there, but we're not blogging and we're not Twitter. I mean, that's just the culture that we work in, and I can't see that changing. The company, however, is interested in using its heritage, and that is growing. So we've got a social media plan together, which is the first time we've done that. It saddens me a little that, particularly a few weeks ago when I was asked for a nice picture for Easter, and you've got to go and find a cuddly bunny somewhere, and you're kind of wondering what the purpose of keeping the collection is if it's being used for those purposes. So I'm a bit anxious about the collection being used in that way, but it's kind of where we're going at the moment. And so really the collection is being used predominantly to support the reputation of the company, to create brand advocacy within our customers, our stakeholders, our shareholders, that kind of thing. But times are changing, and I kind of feel we're in a really good position at the moment to broaden out our collection. I'm really proud of the collection. I think there's some fantastic stuff in there, and I'm very keen to open that up more to members of the public and to academics. So we're moving more into this arena, and there's a couple of projects that we are working with at the moment that is just getting us into the digital world. The first one is the picture of Jessie that you see at the top is at the National Portrait Gallery, and we're working with the gallery to help them create an online educational resource. So they'll be using some of the collection. It's all to do with medical pioneers, so we'll be using part of the collection to for educational purposes, which will be really useful for us because we haven't done that before. And then another way we're opening up the collection is coming through a Wellcome Trust grant that we've just received, which is great news, and that is all around looking at the collection in terms of access, so digitisation very much in terms of preservation and access possibilities, because we're in Nottingham, we're not in London, so to be able to kind of open up some of the lengthy series of records would be really useful. But also in terms of looking at our catalogue and getting that into a position where we can start putting our catalogues online, because we're really transforming it into this internal service into something that's much more externally focused. But what we have done in the last few years is opened up a small exhibition on our site. Now this is purely for visitors to Boots. It's not for the general public. It is business visitors, it's VIPs again, partnerships, stakeholders, employees. So this is the kind of tour that we do for general inductions every month, and it uses the heritage, the museum collection and the archive collection. And this is the most money I've ever had out of the company to create this. This was very exciting. So what we did was we needed it to look right in the space that it was occupying. Before we just moved something out of the old museum, and it was all old wood, and it was a recreation of a Boots pharmacy, and it didn't work with the very modern reception area of the main head office. So we tried to work with the space that we had, and part of the money I wanted to use to create some kiosks. You can just see he's a member of the Boot family, by the way. He was just playing with one of these kiosks that we've got. We paid for 4 kiosks and a timeline. And the reason I included that was partly to supplement the collection for the visitors that would be coming into D90, which is the main office, because most of our collection is archive, like M&S. it's not that exciting when you put it in a case. People are going to walk right past it. Whereas when you've got lipsticks and perfume bottles, that's really what we wanted to fill the case with. So the idea of the kiosk was to supplement that and add all these extra layers using the archive material, which on its own probably isn't that exciting unless it's a beautiful advert. So that was one reason. The other reason was because we are a massive global company. We're in about 26 different countries, and this, using web technology, allowed us to take whatever was on the kiosk and put it on our internet site. So that is now available worldwide, and that is the only application that we have really that has our material available. And I know I've shown many people around the exhibition, and I know that they will go on to look at it because there's so much more in the kiosk for people to look through. So just to quickly show you what we've done. So this is the online entry into it, and then we took the four subject areas of the exhibition, which are in front of each of the four cases. And then we were able to drill these down into wider subject themes. So we've got, coming out of the four, we've got 23. So you can instantly see how you can add value by using this digital means. This is just to show you how we've done it. So it's really basic. It's an image and then captions. So we didn't really use captions in the exhibition. We used the kiosks as our captions. And then we've got this timeline running through it. We also used it for some of the archive material, so having that zooming in and out, because you can't really read that, and you certainly can't read that if it's in a case. So that ability to bring it closer to the user we thought was really useful. And we also did the same with objects. So we have some objects which we felt would be useful if we could rotate them round. So again, this is a feature that we added in quite simply, just taking lots of photographs of an object. Wasn't anything more technical than that, but really just to bring something different through the kiosks. And then finally, the kind of way that we're moving forward is there is real appetite within the organisation to create a museum, which is really exciting. And I've been spending the last couple of years getting ideas and trying to think about what it is we want to create, which is why this group is really useful for me, because I'm right at the beginning of that journey. And where I'm at with it now is that the company is very interested in it, but I think we are having to go down public funding to make this happen. The company will fund so much, but it won't fund to the extent that I'd quite like them to fund it. So, which is great for me, because that means I can take it down the community route, which is where I want to go with this. Boots is incredibly important within our region. It's one of the last surviving big companies of Nottingham, and there are thousands and thousands of people within that local community who've got real family connection with the organisation. They have no access to our collection at the moment, and this will really open that up for them. So I'm wanting to make it community based, and I think that the digital opportunities there are huge in terms of allowing people that personal experience. And when I was reading your review, that's the bit that really shouts out to me, the way that we can pull together what on their own is quite boring images or artifacts, but when you pull them all together and allow somebody to navigate their way through it and find the bit that's of particular interest to them, I think you can really enhance the experience. And it's also something that could be different every time you visit somewhere. If you've got that different level of kind of digital media in there, it can be different depending on your mood of the day. Other thoughts about the review? I've just scribbled a few things on the back of this, so apologies for that it's not coherent. Another issue that I thought of was about how digital can change the original, and how, I don't know if anyone else has had that, but whether there has certainly been questions about whether you can airbrush certain things out of it. So I think there's a question or a theme to look at. I mentioned dwell time earlier. I think that's really interesting about people's experience and how much longer they spend by having the digital experience. And I know from my own children, I know you're saying about your son, was it, who's in the digital. My daughter is the same, and if she's got a piece of homework that she can't get off the internet, she's not interested. And I have tried and tried, believe me. But having said that, I took her to the Churchill exhibition a few years ago, because I used to work on the Churchill archives, and that was fantastic. And I didn't care whether she learned anything, but the fact that she was there and she was playing on this digital table, for me, meant that she would go back to another museum. It wasn't this stuffy, starchy, sterile experience. It was something that was active, that she felt she could participate in. She could choose what she wanted to do. And I think, if nothing else, if we can create something where it is a welcoming and sensory and actual environment, that's kind of what I'm going for. There was the opportunity to create a purely digital museum, and I'm so far away from that, because the more I've looked into this, the more I believe in having a physical space where people can come together and you can get some really long-term benefits from that. And the amount of conversations I've had with some quite hard-faced businessmen about paying lots of money for this, and by the end of those discussions they turn around and they tell me about a really positive experience they've had in their youth going to a museum or taking their children around a museum. You kind of think, actually having a museum has got to be the way forward for us, for that whole corporate social responsibility angle. I shall stop there.
Okay, so questions.
Can I just ask, I just wondered to Hannah actually about, I know you didn't mention on the M&S site, you've got the kind of memories section, haven't you, where people can add their memories of M&S?
We do, yeah. There are a couple of other aspects to the website that our website is currently being redeveloped, and I'm not entirely sure what's going to remain there.
That's interesting. I was just wondering if you've done any evaluation of that, because that gets at the kind of personalised that you were talking about a little bit, Sophie, and that we touched on. Yeah, do people get something from relating it back to them and thinking about their memories of going in a store in the 60s?
Yeah, I mean, I think M&S is one of those companies that everybody's got an association with. Yeah. Some people do want to share that, and I think it has been a very well-received part of the website. But yeah, as it is undergoing quite a big transformation, I'd like to mention it just in case it's sort of moved out in the redevelopment.
It'll be interesting to see if it's seen as a priority.
Thinking about the memory thing, I was a visit I took to Liverpool a couple of years ago. There's a model of some streets, and I was listening to a chap telling his grown-up grandson, about the war and where he lived in the street, and he was pointing it out, and then his grandson was asking lots of questions about it, and I was just watching that, thinking how fantastic that was, that they were sparking this memory. I mean, it wasn't a digital offer, but it was that physical presence that sparked that conversation, which as a single user tapping away, you kind of lose that. So I thought that was really powerful.
We have a programme called Tell Me About It, which is exactly that thing, to encourage cross-generational transfer of information, grandparent to grandchild. So I'm glad you've seen that in action there.
No, well, it was.
But we do positively encourage that through sessions with groups of a certain age, shall I say, older groups, and we encourage them to bring their grandchildren in and talk about things. I'll also mention that the House of Memories project, which we do in Liverpool, that's a different project. I'll come back to that.
Yeah, I liked the focus from both papers really on that sense of the audience and the community, because I'm now working sort of community, and that idea of having a physical offering as a centre point, as a spark for collections. We've also got communities though who don't have access to physical artefacts, or their remoteness, and one of the groups we're working with are on the Scottish Islands. They don't even have, their broadband's terrible, so they don't really have the digital offer either. So one of the things that we're looking at, and they're building up to community broadband in a couple of years' time, is things around also things that might be reconstituted somewhere else for them. So we're just starting to think about what's possible through 3D printing, for example. So you can provide templates for people to print objects, which might be, it doesn't seem so far-fetched now. In another 5 years' time, I think it's going to be relatively cheap. And we're also just starting to think about space as well, archiving space contexts. And there's work going on at Leeds at the moment around mapping spaces, digitally mapping spaces, recording sounds, and actually, believe it or not, smells as well. So it seems like science fiction 5 years ago, but in another 5 years, I suspect that's where some of those solutions might come from. And I think that may be something to just have a nudge towards. in relation to this?
We're doing a project with just starting out with Nottingham University around the smells, because that's a really powerful memory, and using that to work with patients with dementia. So we're using the old formulations, recreating some of these very strong, like your mother's perfume or the baby powder that you used with, when you were a mother in the 50s, and trying to work with those to create some sort of storytelling narrative in the hope that that will help. And then learning from that, and then hopefully having some of those within the museum once I draw down some money for it.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about the specific challenge of being a business archive? Because it seems to me it's interesting you were talking about going down the community route. Does that bring challenges? Because in terms of kind of the archive being there as a business need, the more you open it up, the more you kind of lose control of the message, I guess. And is that kind of an issue for you guys?
Completely, and I think for me, I've had a real battle about whether this is a corporate showpiece, whether it's a marketing palace, and I'm so far up against that. So it's really how it's been positioned and who you speak to within the organisation in terms of building a business case that it's a good thing for the business if it is a community museum, and what are the benefits of doing it that way, and how much more genuine and how much more you'll get advocates for the brand by taking that route rather than taking a route where it's marketing powers. There's also a very practical step where it's funding and it's having to go for external funding, which means it cannot be a benefit to the business, it has to be all about the community. So there's definite practical approaches, but for me it's about opening it to a wider audience because it is so closed at the moment, and as the keeper of it, it's heartbreaking that you can't do more with it. You're really just relying on whether somebody wants to have a fluffy bunny on a social media website. So but I get your point. I mean, I think there is in terms of making stuff available.
And following Sophie's point on funding, is being a business, external funding opportunities are very, very limited compared to public sector heritage institutions.
It's really interesting, this relationship between heritage and market value and the marketisation of heritage, and of course we're seeing that going through all these brands at the moment, the John Lewis project about 150 years and the products that have been produced, and I've been sucked into it as much as anybody else. But then that really interesting word I think you used about airbrushing and the memories. And the trouble is that we cannot, when we work in co-production, we cannot control the voice as curators, and therefore you will have people who have incredibly positive, amazing memories of their experience of M&S, and then other people who perhaps don't. And they're equally valid for us as historians, but not as valid or not as useful for the business. And I think that's really interesting, the way the digital can enable those voices, but also could offer us the opportunity to airbrush those voices. And I think that's something within a critical review as well about, it's again power, value and power.
I have to admit as well, the members page at the moment is moderated.
Yeah, it's bound to.
Whatever's submitted doesn't go straight onto the website, goes in there.
But at least if you're capturing it, then at least it's kept as a collection. You might you close it for X amount of time, but at least it's not lost. You're just not publishing it. So it's still a way of capturing it where you might not have done before.
Presumably you can also then still inform the way you think about the collection. It can still inform your thinking. You don't have to actually put kind of all the data out there.
The idea of moderation is interesting, though, because people have bad memories as well.
Of course.
And what do you do with those?
Yes, it is difficult. And we have community groups that come in very often, and they have very strong opinions on the way that M&S is run as a business today. So we are dealing with those on a daily basis. But once you have the opportunity to talk through why the business has made certain decisions, it informs their thinking and does get them to change their mindset a little bit. We're not saying completely, but I think they've got enough information.